Hi everyone, my name is Marjun Toro, and I will be your host for this episode of Fashion Conversation Innovative Materials, brought to you by Jakarta Fashion Week 2022 in collaboration with Institut Français Indonesia. The more intensively climate change is discussed, the more intensely the fashion world is associated with this issue. BBC reported that the fashion industry accounts for about 8 to 10% of global carbon emissions and nearly 30% of wastewater. Denim is the most widely popular example of this issue. The UN estimates that a single pair of jeans requires a kilogram of cotton. And while cotton is a natural material, but because cotton tends to be grown in dry environments, producing this kilo requires about 7,500 to 10,000 liters of water. That is about 10 years worth of drinking water for one person. The search for solutions is actively carried out. Today, the fashion industry is venturing into new fields of discovery from material innovations. A key ingredient that could shift the industry towards a more sustainable path is the research and creation of new materials and its innovative implementation. But it's also very important to realize that innovations can't just happen overnight. It takes time and requires a lot of resources and research. There are all the different impacts that need to be thought through. Creating new materials still means we are at risk of creating the same problem or cycle. It has to be taken slowly and considerately while being aware of the future and all the different aspects. What can be classified as innovative materials? How do they impact the fashion industry and the world? And how do fashion designers and artists use these materials in their scope of work? Joining me today to discuss these issues are Stephanie Strauss, founder of Mandari Agency. Launched in 2016, the agency focuses on supporting fashion brands in their ecological transition. In 2020, Stephanie launched an e-learning platform on sustainable fashion issues, SustainLearn, with modules on greenwashing, classification of sustainable materials and their certifications, which will be online from 2022 in 3 different languages. Next one, we have Muhammad Widodo, head of postgraduate program for textile engineering and apparel technology at Polytechnic STTT Bandung. Widodo started his career in the textile world since 1992. His research interests includes plasma technology for alternative sustainable processing of textiles, surface modification of textiles and polymers, and development of smart systems based on textiles and polymer. Moving on, we have Louise Ling Bjerregaard, designer for her own namesake brand. Louise launched her namesake label in 2019, working across seasons with a focused curiosity towards investigating and merging contrasting materials and redefining traditional knitwear. The garments are centered around ready-to-wear and couture pieces infused with nostalgia and the labor of hands. Louise also works with presenting garments as installations and has been featured in galleries and institutions such as the National Gallery of Denmark. And last but not least, we have Pishatorn Mualdayasri, designer from the Yarn Story Studio. Pishatorn believes that innovative materials, fabrics, and textiles is about something that was created with the purpose of fixing the problems that we face in the industry. They can replace toxic materials, enhance productivity, improve user life, and reduce waste. She aims to combine innovative local materials and aesthetics together to create practical, beautiful, and precious textiles and products for the industry. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all today.
Hi.
Hi, good to see you.
Hope you're all well wherever you are in the globe. Okay, to open the conversation today, I will go directly to Stephanie, I think. So Stephanie, tell us, based on your research and analysis within your agency, how badly do we need innovative, natural, and environmentally friendly materials, and why do you think so?
Well, thank you, Maji, and thank you for having me. We need it extremely badly. The industry is basically working on monofiber, meaning that we use 60% of all the textiles in the world are synthetic fibers and that are derived from petrol. Today, that is a huge environmental issue that is producing a lot of problems within the industry. And because it's easy fiber, it's very easy to use, it's easy to dye, it's easy to produce, and it's very cheap, that has created this need in the industry to use polyester. We currently don't really know how to recycle it well. So not only is it a big impact when we produce the new fibers, but also we don't know what to do with it afterwards. Then, of course, there's cotton, which is the second largest fiber used in the industry. And as you talked about earlier, it's using a lot of water. There's a lot of pesticides. It uses a lot of chemicals. And it's about 20 to 25% of all the fibers. So actually, innovative materials, new materials, alternative materials only account for about 15, maybe 20% of all the fiber use in the world. So the need for that is huge. Not only do we need new fibers, we don't yet have a fiber that is perfect. We don't have one single fiber that could come in and replace the need for polyester or even conventional cotton. We have several very, very good innovations that are arising, but they need research, they need financial support, and also the industry needs to adapt to these new fibers. So there's a lot of work to be done in this area regarding materials. It's really a really big part of the sustainability transition that the industry needs to do.
Thank you, Stephanie. Touching base on what you just mentioned about this research needs more support in terms of mostly also financial, right? So in that sense, I want to move to Pak Widodo. Tell us, Pak Widodo, technically, what can be classified as innovative materials? And this is your field of work and research.
Yes, thank you, Margie, and thank you for having me here, and hello, everyone. Yes, the innovative material, I guess, is for me, it's all kinds of material that responds to the challenge that we are facing. The materials that provide solutions to the challenging issues that we have, be it sustainable issues or technical issues. So that's what I think about the innovative materials. So the innovation itself, it can come from the substance itself, from the chemicals, from the chemistry of the materials. And you can also have the aspect of innovation in the process of making it. So, for example, you still have the polyester, for example. But if you make the polyester out of the alternative sources, like, for example, based on the microbiology or from the bacteria. And recently I read a paper that a group of researchers have come up with an idea and also the production to produce polyester out of carbon dioxide. So you can imagine that your carbon dioxide, you can make polyester out of it. So that's what I think about the innovative materials. Not only that the material itself, but also the process and also the sources of that material is also important. And then it also has to address the problems that we have, response to what we need, and also the future needs.
Thank you, Mr. Widodo. I think like continuing to what Stephanie just said, what do you think is the significant challenges in exploring and producing these materials for the innovative materials, Pak Widodo?
The most challenging thing about pursuing this direction is that, I guess Stephanie has mentioned it, that it needs a huge support and financial issues there. And because if you cannot see the motivation behind, or you need incentive to do that, because when you do research, for example, you have to be able to see what's going to that was going to give you at the end of the research, and you have to have the conviction that your output from the research will be useful and will have the support from the public, and then there is financial issues there also. So I guess the most challenging thing is the financial support and also the support from the public.
Thank you, Pak Widodo. We will talk about that again later on. Coming back to Stephanie, in response to what Pak Widodo just said, although we need to make sustainability something more normal, and it is something like we all talk about nowadays, but at the same time, most sustainable, let's say, brands can also mean expensive or exclusive. For example, in Indonesia itself, the majority of clothing labels that claim to be sustainable are often very niche and artisanal with higher price tags. So, which means they are more expensive and not too accessible for everyone. What do you think can be done to make these innovative materials and sustainable materials more affordable and accessible?
Yeah, of course. There are sort of two types of brands. There are the brands like Louise, who was more high end, who are using specific techniques to show that couture and sustainability can be linked into something, and which is a very important message in today's regarding Fashion Week. That Fashion Week doesn't have to be something that doesn't have sustainability. And then there are brands that implement it later on. I think it's especially those brands that we need to work on. It's the ones that were based on a non-sustainable production, and they need to adapt to these new ways. Because what we see in our work is that young designers, new brands, are very keen on taking on these new innovations and supporting the research that has been done. And as Mohammed is saying, there are already really, really good solutions. There are really strong research that are responding to some of these problems. But getting larger brands that hasn't been established for a long time to use these innovations is one of the big challenges that we have. And in that sense, we need, of course, the research, but we also need education. We need not only for the young designers, but also for the in-house designers. In the brands, they need to understand the impact of what they're doing and their production. And that is one of the challenges that we see. And one of the things that we do in our work is to sit down with the CEO, with the director, and actually show them what their impact is. And they're not always aware of that. Of course, they know they're not necessarily improving the environment, but they don't actually understand the whole process. And sustainability, especially in materials, is a very, very complex pathway. So when you go from the raw fiber to the actual clothing you see in the store, it has gone through an extreme complex process. And today we are not actually able to always follow it completely through. So a lot of the fibers, this is mainly for natural fibers, is that we lose it as soon as the cotton, for example, flour has been spun into a fiber. We lose track of it. We don't know where it comes from. And we don't know who has made it. And that is one of the big issues. So yeah, a big issue if we need this to really function is to be able to have these innovative materials at a large scale, but also to educate designers in using them and how to implement it into their current production.
That is very interesting, and then we'll talk about how you will help in this transition later on. I want to move on to the designers here, as you know, the creative people, to Luis and Pishathorn. As designers, can you share with us about your brand and your exploration of sustainable material in your label and designs? Maybe we start from Luis first.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me in this. I mean, the magnitude of this topic is pretty wild to grasp, especially being a young designer like me. I'm based in Paris, where I have my mainly an artisanal practice in an atelier. But going back to what Stephanie just briefly touched on, I think my responsibility as a designer lies in the education and also the being able to adapt and be ready to receive these new materials once they arrive in our ateliers. So, so what I'm primarily working on in my own atelier, but also as a consultant for some of the bigger houses who maybe have a more difficult time incorporating these sustainable practices than my atelier currently faces. I think it's really interesting because once you, as a designer, are able to not see sustainability and the use of sustainable, innovative materials as a limitation to your artistic practice, I think then you're able to more easily adapt it and also change it into, I would say, a more affordable and more accessible product for all consumers. So it doesn't necessarily have to be exclusive artisanal pieces. It's more about how not to be afraid to link it together with your artistic practice. And I think that also I teach at art schools and universities as well. And I think teaching like a younger generation of how to incorporate dead stock materials, which is the base of my practice, into sellable items that are commercialized, but also without compromising on your artistic practice. I think that's the way to really see this sustainability issue as a whole. So we don't only have marketing frontiers and textile engineers, but we also take it to the core of the studios and the ateliers and the houses and really incorporate the change from the core, I would say. And what I think is important that we can do, because I can't present, you know, factory certifications and everything, because we work mostly by hand and a lot of refined techniques. But I think the longevity that goes into this aspect of creating clothing is really important. And I think down the line, for sure, we're able to incorporate this, because then if you get a fiber that's spun from, let's say, a pineapple production, then it's not as, you're not as a designer afraid to use it, because you've been trained from the very beginning to use whatever is available to you of dead stock fabrics and materials. So then you're kind of used to working with whatever is there. And then it can be right now a monofilament, as Stephanie touched base on, but it could also be a raw fiber from a pineapple production. So it doesn't really matter what type of fabric it is, as long as you're not afraid to incorporate the change into your artistic level of practice. And that goes with students in school, but also the big houses in Paris.
Thank you, Luis. So these are some of your works and the research and the innovation that you've done, right, Luis?
Yes.
So what do you think is the most interesting or materials that you have worked with so far?
I think the most, I don't have a most interesting material as a singular. I think the most interesting way of working is working with what has already been produced of fibers and learning how to navigate the fibers into shape. And you can only do that by knowledge and by working with it with your hands, because you can send it to production in Europe or outside of Europe or wherever they have the machinery to facilitate a textile production. But I think the change comes with knowledge, and I think the real knowledge is you need to have it in your hands yourself. And I think that's really interesting. And it's really interesting operating an atelier with younger people, teaching them the value of craftsmanship and how to work with all sorts of textiles, no matter what it is. I think that's really key.
Thank you, Luis. Next, maybe we can go to Shatorn. Same question. Can you share with us about your brand and your exploration of sustainable material?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me as well. So I am Pishathorn Nondaisi. I am a textile designer based on Bangkok, Thailand. I have my textile design studio, which is the name is the Yarn Story. So we provide the design service for the designers, which is based on textile design. So there is one project that I would like to show you, which I think is can relate to both sustainable and also innovative materials. This project is about Thai silk yarn, which is our heritage of Thai silk, Thai textile materials for 100 years. I use wastes from Thai silk fabric and also raw Thai silk, which haven't been dyed or passed any chemical process. And I combine them with the innovative yarns, which I want to show you all the video how it look. So this is the fabric that I create from Thai silk yarn and also Thai silk waste fabric. This one. That I will explain for you or later on. This is the first one, and this is another one which is created from Thai raw silk. Okay, for that, I will explain more about the project. I has been working on creating the fabric that can combine the local materials and also innovative material textile together. This project I was aimed to give the applications of the fabric, which has two kinds of condition of light. The first one that you see when this fabric has exposed to the sunlight, it will change to another colors. And also when you take the photo with the mobile applications or the flat cameras, it's going to be changed in auto shelf. This project it can be in Thailand. We have been in hand weaving business, and Thai silk material can define as the cultural products. So I would like for young generations and new designers to understand more about Thai silk materials and also Thai silk yarns and use it in more creatively ways and also in new sustainable ways. So the project is to combine innovation and also cultural product together to give the new aspect of Thai silk. Yeah.
Thank you, Shatorn. We will get back again about the silk. Now I want to continue to ask to both of you actually, because consumer nowadays, they want comfort, but they also want durability and also want sustainability in their clothing. What are the challenges that you are facing in combining all those elements to create a collection? Luis, maybe you can start first.
Okay, I think for my practice, maybe this question isn't perfectly tailored to my practice because I don't, when creating a collection, one of my concerns is not the consumer. in the sort of sense that the clothing has to be worn. So my practice is kind of like you have so many French houses with such a huge legacy. And so I think my job as a younger generation is to show these houses, to kind of be the forefront of how can you do couture where you don't necessarily think about if it can go into a washing machine. But how can you do couture that is sustainable and comes from sustainable materials, even like no matter if it's an upcycled Thai silk, which I think is really beautiful, or if it's a monofilament yarn from a plastic bottle production, or if it's just scraps and dead stock. So I think then once we have that awareness of the houses, knowing that you don't have to compromise, I think that's when you can think durability and these other mechanisms made for consumerism into the equation. But until then, the only focus I can have in that sense is longevity in garments, and also to make consumers aware of the value of fabric and the value of clothing. I think that's super important. So you don't have like this mass consumerism, but that it's also a change of mindset about how to take care of the garment once it's made from, like once it's made.
Thank you, Luis. Very, very insightful. So moving on to Pishatron, I think same question, but I think you also have similar approach with Luis in that you are more into educating about how to use this material that you are creating, right?
Yeah. So I think the challenging that I faced in the project, this is the how to educate the client. It also same as the Stephanie says before, that we have the challenge that we have to educate the client and also the designer to understand more about the concept of sustainability. For example, in Thailand, there is one material which become really popular recently, which is the recycled yarn that Luis has been mentioned before. You know, actually, we cannot find the clean plastic bottles enough for the industry to replace all the materials, you know, and also we have to clean the plastic bottle before we use it in the industry, which is we use a lot of water to produce it. So we have to educate the designer that you use recycled yarn from the plastic bottle, it's not going to resolve any problem about the sustainability, you know, and we have to think more in every process that we going to produce the textile designs or the fashions. It's not about something that you use waste or something you use the recycled material to produce it, but the way you give it, the way you get it, the way you clean it, the way you use it, the way how the design, the client's going to use it in the future. This is all about the thing that we face, that we have to think more in many aspects, you know. And also in reality, some people understand that when you use the cotton, which is people think that it's more sustainable than the synthetic fibers, but actually it uses a lot of waters and more about the how to process it. We lose a lot of environment, and but if we use the synthetic fibers, it has long life than some of the natural fiber. So we have to compare which one we lose more in the industry. So this is a thing that I think we have to educate the designers and clients more about what is the really sustainable concept in our world of fashion industry. Yeah.
that is a very good point, Sharon, because I think there's a lot of misinformation going on in the industry. And this has been cherry picked for people, whether they realize it or not, into doing the practice that we call greenwashing, right? In this point, like I want to ask maybe to Stephanie, to Luisa, and also to you, Sharon, like, what do you think? What's your take on greenwashing, and what do you think should be done to avoid that, especially to the younger designers and creative workers who maybe they know about it, maybe they don't, because of all this information going around, but that's not really proven to be true.
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree with Peter Thorn in the challenges that we face. We also see that in our work. Working with sustainability is very different for each designer, because there's the choice of the new fibers, there's choices of producing maybe 3D regarding patterns, or there's zero waste, or as Louise is doing with dead stock. There's not just one model that can fit all, and that's important to understand about sustainability. But the current problem is that, at least with the brands that we work with and what we see generally in the industry, is that the consumer wants and the media wants sustainability, and the brand is not actually able to implement it directly when they haven't done it from the beginning. I'm still talking about these brands that are producing in a traditional way and wants to implement sustainability. Then what they're thinking about first is how to communicate it. So they actually want to do it the wrong way around. They want to start with communicating about the sustainable actions, about what they're doing, because they're now using recycled fibers or whatever it is they implemented, but they're not actually working with it throughout the whole production circle. So what we're trying to do is to, as Peter Thorn also is saying, is the education of, to avoid greenwashing, is that you need to understand the real impact of what your choices are doing. So maybe you chose a sustainable fiber, or what can be classified as a sustainable fiber, but you're overproducing. In the end, you're not selling it, and you don't have any work on what to do with all this overproduction in the end. Then using a sustainable fiber won't solve the problem. This misinformation is really based on the lack of research and the lack of funding regarding research. For example, in France, the design schools and the fashion schools don't have the level of PhD, which is a huge problem. We don't have the creative industry, the designers actually thinking about research. They're not going into that part. You can be an engineer and then specialize in textiles, or you can be a sociologist and specialize in fashion. But this is marginal. We don't have enough of that. So the misinformation also comes from a lack of information. Fashion is one of the industries that is the less studied in the world, but has the most financial and also an environmental impact. Fashion is a huge industry. It's one of the largest in France, but we still don't research it. And the misinformation comes from that. And also from, for example, saying that fashion is the second most polluting industry. It sounds good. It's a good punchline. It's a good statement for the media, but we don't really know if it's true because we haven't been able to research it. And I think a lot of brands, they're sort of, I have two categories when it comes to greenwashing. They're the ones that do it, but without actually knowing that they're greenwashing. They're saying things that they haven't researched it, they haven't looked into it. They just want to look greener than they maybe are. And then there's the one who are doing it deliberately. And a lot of the larger fashion brands are doing it deliberately. And that is a problem. But at least this is where we need support from political and the governments But at least in Europe, it's such an unknown domain that even the governments don't really know how to implement laws that can protect from greenwashing. But in 2022, there's a new law coming on greenwashing in Europe from the European Commission, where they will go in and look and have these two specific categories if you were deliberately greenwashing, or if you were doing it because you're copying information that was out there.
Thank you. That's very enlightening. I think maybe I want to ask Pishathorn on how's the practice. I mean, like as a rep from Southeast Asia, how's the practice of greenwashing and what is the government? Is there any action from the government or any regulations that's being put into action regarding that?
In this topic, I'm not sure about the really policies that we have in our government yet or not. I think we have, but it's not that seriously taken on the industry that much, because we are not. We think it has to be improved, but it's not. They still think that it's not kind of urgent issues for the industry, because as we say, we are the industry that produce a lot of fast fashions, but we think more about the economics. But I think in our 2020s we have to think more about that, and the government have to have more policy on that. Not in fashion brand, most of them think more about sustainability, but actually it's not that sustainability it has to be. Yeah, I think not only Southeast Asia, I think it has to be more about globally, that we have to get together and set up the standard of sustainability to the global, to the fashion industry of our planet. Yeah.
Thank you. Hopefully in next year we will see a bigger change on that one. So coming back to Stephanie, I think you have touched upon this a little, like bit by bit in every questions that I pose. But can you explain how does your agency, the Mandiri agency, support fashion brands in their ecological transition?
Yeah, of course. So what we do is that we have two sort of way of working with them. We have with our consultancy, where we go in and we start by doing an internal audit within the fashion brand, so that they all understand what their impact is, what their role is, because the CEO to the designer, to the pattern maker, to the buyer, all have a role to play if we need to incorporate real sustainability, because it's the whole process of the garment that needs to change. It's not just the fiber, as I mentioned quickly, and they need to understand each that they have a role to play, and to get them into it, so that it's not something that we put down on them and say, you now need to do this. It has to be an evolution also. They have to be able to adopt it more and more and implement more and more strategies towards sustainability. That is how we work with different brands. Then we also created a platform for a more widely education regarding sustainability. So it's called Sustain Learn. And it's a platform that will be launched here in the beginning of 2022, where we interview and talk with experts and researchers about what is being done at the moment. So this is not about just giving you a module and say, if you follow this, you will have a sustainable brand. It's about creating a community where people are joining in with their point of view, giving new solutions, figuring out what is going on at the moment, and how can we get it out to a wider audience. Because the work I also teach in different fashion schools, and I see it, they they don't know about sustainability. They learn little parts of it about what sustainability can be, but they don't understand it as a global. And I think the difference is really that, is that the whole fashion brand in their production needs to understand all the parts of the other people that they're working with. But because of outsourcing and the way that we produce fashion today, most designers have never met the pattern maker, and they have never seen where their fibers come from. They don't know how the production is done in the factories. And the salesperson who is out there telling the stores and telling the consumers directly has absolutely no idea how the garment was made. And these are things that we need to change. It takes time, but that's why I really believe that education and research are the main two focus that we need to do to actually change the industry. And it's really important with the work that both Louise and Pitcher Thorn are doing, is that not only that they're creating their fabrics, they're doing their own research, they're finding new solutions, but they're also the images, and they're the faces towards the industry and saying, this is what can be done, this is what we are doing, this is how we are doing it. And they're not doing it at all in the same way, but they're both doing a sustainable approach to fashion. And I think that is very inspiring, and we need to get that also to the younger generation so they can see that it's possible.
Thank you, Stephanie. I want to go back. I want to go back a bit to Louise. Since your work is very interesting, and it's as you were saying, it's not consumer focused. It's more on like you want to educate and show to the legacy fashion houses that there are ways that can be done to make things more sustainable. I think I want to go back, like way back, and what piqued your interest into this sustainability and your research.
So actually, I think that's a good question, because to make change, you also have to be honest. And what Stephanie spoke about with education, and it starts with education. For me, it started being broke, basically. I didn't have any money, and I knew I had a really big talent of creating fashion and artistic clothing. So I just had to use whatever I had available, and school tuition fees are wildly expensive in Europe. That's what I know that it is in Europe. I can't speak on others' behalf, but so for me, it was a necessity to use what I had available. And then later on, as I developed my practice, it became the core. Even if I suddenly were able to buy fabric online or from another source. And I think what should also be taught in the school systems is the financial aspect of not only running a fashion label, but also incorporating sustainability, because as you touched base on, it's the second most polluting industry in the world, or close to, and it's such a big financial sector as well. So the gap between graduating, setting off on your own, or working for someone else, and then like the finances, it just doesn't, there's just a big gap of knowledge being lost. And I think that's an important topic to also teach about in schools, like how do you make it financially sustainable as well. And I also think we need to address that it's okay that you are making Eco-Tex sweatpants, but how many more sweatpants does the world actually need? Like, do we need some kind of sanctions on how many t-shirts are being produced in the world? So I think there's still a lot of work to be done in that matter. And I think a lot of what I can do when speaking at schools and institutions, and also having interns and apprentices in my atelier, is that it's really relatable, not necessarily having a ton of money to start on your own. So I think I gain a momentum with a younger generation, because they can relate to that it's expensive being a designer and dreaming about being a designer. And then suddenly, by showing how it can be done, you have a curiosity. And I think curiosity is one of the main factors for us to get this change to happen more, maybe at a more rapid speed, because we can talk so much we want, but if people are not interested in, and if they can't relate to it on their own behalf, the knowledge is quickly lost. So I'm like seeing from my perspective, I'm really hopeful that this is able to go in a more positive direction.
Thank you, Luis. That is very inspiring. So it does start from yourself, right? And then you get to spread it everywhere else. So you were talking also about education, and I want to go back to Pak Widodo from the
Yes.
educational side. So fashion, like materials made from environmentally sustainable sources, is increasingly turning into a big business nowadays, and then it will grow bigger and bigger in the next, I think, 5 years and more. People are looking to use waste from natural materials like fruits, like Luis had already mentioned about pineapple. So like fruits to create their textiles. In the world of research itself, what stage are we at in Indonesia, and also maybe globally? You can explain, Pak Widodo.
Yes, thank you, Margie. Before we on further on that issue, I want to share with you the screen to show you the education that we have here in Indonesia about the sustainability. So let me show you. So this is the program that we have here in STTT Bandung, which is the School of Textile Technology. So actually, I'm working as a teacher in a university of textile technology. So in this master program, we have like 3 pillars of excellence, or 3 pillars of focus area that we want to develop in the future. So if you can see here that we have the first pillar is the advanced textiles. You are familiar with the like smart textiles, and then technical textiles. Technical textiles is any kind of textiles that are used for non-clothing materials, like for carpets, and then for automotive industry, for geotextiles that cover the technical textiles. And then you also have in these advanced textiles, what we call the functional textiles, where you are talking about the antimicrobial, when you're talking about the, as Pichatron explained before, the fiber that changes color upon contact with light, for example. That's what we call the photochromic fiber. That's the functional textiles. And then we also have what we call the fashionable technology. What we mean by fashionable technology is that we are talking about fashion, but then we want to see how the technology and fashion merge together, and it doesn't have to be like separate. Sometimes when you talk about fashion, you are looking at the product of fashion for your eyes and also for your bodily experience. But then function is something else, separate from that. So what we are looking at is more and more product that is fashionable technology. That's what we call the advanced textiles. And then when we touch on the topic of sustainability, like we just have discussed now, is the sustainable renewable materials. So that's what we are talking now. And then Pichatron says something about cotton using a lot of water in the dyeing. So we have like a process that don't use water for dyeing. That's what we call the waterless dyeing. They are using supercritical carbon dioxide to replace the water as the medium of dyeing. So you don't need to use water. So with this technology, you could replace water altogether, and then you don't have any problem with the use and also with the wastewater that comes out from the dyeing factory. So this is the 3 pillars that we have in our university, just to make a point about the importance of education in the issues of sustainability. So you can see here that we at least have 2 pillars talking about the sustainability, which is sustainable material and sustainable process. And then, yes, coming back to your question, Margie, about the use of fruits, for example, that's what we call the, or just stop sharing, what we call the bio-based materials. So you can either have like fruits or any kind of like waste left over from food, for example, or waste from the other industry. So that's what we call the bio-based materials. Well, actually, the research in Indonesia is quite active in this area. The only problem is that we don't have the focus like concerted action. So people are doing it separately, sporadically. So we don't, we are not working in the same domain altogether, and then we are communicating each other. So that there are a lot of things that we are doing it multiple times. So, and there are areas that are no people are working on some of the materials. So, so that's one of the problems that we have in this area, getting the fiber or from the waste or bio-based product. Just to give you an example of the bio-based product, for example, is the use of, this is already commercialized by the DuPont, the fiber sonora. It comes from the corn. So it's a very high-tech fiber and sustainable also, and it comes from the corn. And there are people developing fibers from bacteria, and even they are producing dyes like indigo, for example, from bacteria. So I have the background in engineering, so I'm trying very hard to understand how people in fashion are working and see things. And I guess I'm learning to understand that. And I have seen people are working together between fashion designers and engineers and even with chemists. I know some people working together in that area. So I guess it will be very interesting if you can see more and more designers, fashion designers, talking with engineers or with chemists. It will give you some, both of us will have some more understanding, better understanding of how things work together. And in addition to what I have called the fashion technology, I have also seen a book called Functional Aesthetics. So it's when we are engineers talking about a product or things, we always tend to see what is the function. Not only that it entertain your eyes and your bodily experience, but also we need to find it is our characteristic. We always want to know what is the function. If you cannot find the function, then it's hard for us to really agree to what people are doing in that. So building better understanding between the two worlds is important, especially when we are talking about the sustainability, because when you're talking about sustainable material, you need research, and then you will have to decide what process which is sustainable, and then what material which is sustainable. And then along the way, just like the Stephanie has explained before, there are many points, entry points that we can enter to be sustainable, because this is such a long and complex chain of supply process, right from the source of the material, and then even with the transportation, even with the process, the choice of machines, and everything, and also with the people. I guess I cannot tell you, Margie, and the others specifically about the bio-based product that we have developed so far, but I can see that this is still quite active area in Indonesia. And we are very much excited with this direction, especially with our government in Indonesia. They have initiatives in sustainable programs in the ministry level, and also between the brands and also with the industries as well.
Thank you, Pak Widodo. We look forward to seeing these innovative materials that you are working on. And probably, hopefully, there are people from fashion design schools who's listening here today, and then they can tap into you or your colleagues or anyone from your alma mater to come into the school and then start teaching about all these materials and how to utilize them. So I think we're running out of time soon. I have a big question for everyone who wants to answer this. Do you think that fashion can ever be truly sustainable? I think this is a hot topic nowadays. So who wants to
Mm.
answer first?
Well, I
I
can
can-
go first if
Okay.
you want. So, okay, maybe more because I'm more of maybe on a general point of view than all of you who are more specified. The quick answer is no, because producing something will always have some sort of impact. But we can do a lot better than what we're doing now. So there is a lot of things to be done, and the things that Mohammad was just saying are really the point that is so positive in the sustainability process, is that there are so many solutions already that are there, and the research is already really advanced compared to how we use it, unfortunately, in the industry. So we really need to find ways to implement it on a larger scale, but the research is there. We need more support, of course, as we were talking about, both financially and the governments, and I agree that we need this larger network where we work together, and we have tried that with Culture de Mode, which is an NGO that I work for as well, that to combine the different actors in the fashion industry that don't usually talk together. So that can be research labs with a museum curator, with a designer, and with schools, and we need to understand better each other's role in this to be able to have a real impact and a real change in the industry.
Thank you, Stephanie. Does anyone wants to add to what Stephanie has just said, or any other point of view, maybe from Pichathorn, Luis, or Pak Widodo?
Yeah, I agree with the Stephanie that actually when we produce something, it has to lose something as well, the industry. But right now, the world has changed a lot. We have social medias, we have people can connecting to each other very easily. So it's kind of the way that we going to help each other is going to be easier. We can talk to the people from other side of the world easier. So we cannot wait for the governments or the people that have the power to change the policies in our world, but we have the people that can easily connect to each other. We can make the sustainability become a trend without the governments or the people that have the powers. We can, for example, we can like have a group of designers from around the world and make something together and become a trend. We have the hashtag of sustainability, no fast fashion. So we're going to improve our industry. I think it's going to be easier for us to have that one. If we look into 10 years ago, sustainable is not that popular. But this day it's become more popular, and it's become a topic, the issue for every country. So I hope that in 10 years it's going to be better, or maybe 5 years it's going to be better, but it's not something that the fashion is not something that cannot change. We can change to make it better in the better ways of producing it. Yeah, I hope that.
Thank you, Pichathorn. Maybe Luis, you want to add something, or do you agree, disagree? You have another point of view?
I agree. I do. I have a counter question that is, I think we should also speak more about what is it that fashion should be able to do? Because there's so many sectors in fashion. You have leisure wear, you have, I mean, there's just so much. You have couture, you have, there's so many various sectors of the industry. So maybe it's like, what should each sector be able to do? Like, what is the goal? Like, what is it that we want from the fashion? And then we can work like backwards towards minimizing waste and targeting it more specifically. So it's not the fashion industry as a whole, but it's one area, maybe specifically at a time.
That's a really good point, Luis. Thank you so much. Pak Widodo?
Yeah, just one short comment or addition to the other speakers have said. I believe that sustainability is a process. So it's not the end. It's not an end. So it is a process. It's a way of life. So when we adopt it as a way of life, as a way our thinking about how we live our life, then I think that's where we should do it. I mean, we don't have to worry about have we get to the end, or can we get to the end as the sustainability? But because sustainability is a process, it's a long way. So just have to adopt it, and then that's the way of our thinking. And then I think it's also identity for the fashion. If you have fashion and take the sustainability as the identity of the fashion, then I think we have come to the right direction. So just twist a little bit about the question and the answers too.
That's very good, Pak Widodo. Good point. It's a process, but hopefully we can all accelerate on that process before more bigger things happen. That's not good for the environment. So thank you everyone. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Piscathorn, and thank you, Pak Widodo, for today, for sharing your knowledge and insight with all of us today in this fashion conversation. Hopefully this conversation could lead to new insights, of course, new knowledge and new awareness regarding fashion and sustainability. Fashion Conversation Innovative Material is presented by Jakarta Fashion Week in partnership with Institute Français Indonesia. For more information on Jakarta Fashion Week, visit us on our social media and website, www.jakartafashionweek.co.id. So I'm Marjun Toro, signing off today. Thank you for tuning in. Stay safe, everyone, and see you in another fashion conversation.